Hey there. It's me, Eden. If you are new to the channel, then please subscribe to my channel and visit my Patreon page for early access, link in the comment, thanks. I began to get in the habit of swimming for a half hour every morning before having breakfast. The exercise was good for me and I began to notice the difference after only a few days. The New Year's Eve party at Sharon's house had been a lot of fun. Most of the people were stunt people or married to one, and I had even met a couple of them previously, on movie sites. I stayed until 1 a.m. and then drove home. At that time of night I was able to get home in an hour since the freeways were mostly empty. The CHIPS, or California Highway Patrol, was out in full force looking for drunk drivers, but I didn't see anybody pulled over as I drove home. The outdoor pool was almost finished, and the new, adjoining jacuzzi would be done in a couple of weeks. The grounds were starting to look beautiful as the groundskeepers continued to clear the old growth and plant more flowers and lawn around the house. The new pool area was beautifully landscaped and provided several large shade trees at one end. Mom had hired one full-time farmhand, George, to tend to the areas away from the house. She had purchased a large new tractor and several implements on George's recommendation, and he had begun clearing the areas around the stable. So far, about 10 acres had been cleared of the trees and bushes that had sprouted up over the past 20 years or so, and seed had been planted for hay. George had said that about half of the land of the estate was suitable for growing hay. He also told Mom that the estate could be classified as a farm and would receive further exemptions from property taxes. In mid-January, I attended the birthday party for the twins. I had bought them a bunch of new outfits and toys. Several of Sharon's friends had brought their toddlers over for the party. Sharon placed the girls in their high chairs and lit a candle on the cake. The twins just stared at the dancing flame until Sharon blew it out for them. We served a small piece of cake to each of the children, but they just wanted to squish it between their fingers. Their mothers wound up trying to feed it to them, but most spit it back out. We had a little bit better luck with the ice cream. All the babies enjoyed that. After the mothers and children had gone, and the twins were asleep, Sharon said to me, "I've been offered a job in the new movie that Roy's been hired for. The stunt work will last for about 6 weeks. Can you take the kids like you offered a couple of months ago?" I hadn't really offered to take the twins, but Sharon had interpreted it that way. "Okay, if you'll be back before mid-March. I have to leave for Vancouver for the new movie that you talked me into taking. I'll be back. The movie starts shooting the stunts next week." "Okay." George, our farmhand, has a pickup truck. I'm sure that he'll be willing to pick up whatever furniture we'll need, such as the cribs, playpen, high chairs, and things. How about doing it on Friday? That way I can stay over at your house for the first night to help if you have any problems. Then I'll leave on Saturday. Okay. We'll come down on Friday afternoon. On Friday, George followed me down to Sharon's house. We loaded up the truck and George left for home while Sharon and I loaded the 2 cars with baby clothes, toys, bottles, baby food, and babies. George had already unloaded the truck by the time that we got there. The cribs were in the nearest empty bedroom to mine, along with the other things that George had picked up. Sharon and I unloaded our cars with help from Mom and Mrs. McGuire. The first order of business after we had finished was to change the twins. Then we fed them, burped them, and put them down for a nap. The twins slept through the night without making a peep. Sharon slept in the room with them and I had a baby monitor speaker on my nightstand. Sharon was all packed for her trip and left right after breakfast, after holding and kissing each of the babies for several minutes. This would be the first time that she had parted from them since she brought them home from the hospital. Unlike Sharon's situation, I had help with the babies. Both Mom and Mrs. McGuire adored them, and I could tell that the girls wouldn't lack attention while they were at the estate. Sharon called almost every night. By the end of the first week, I had fully embraced the tasks of motherhood. My day started with them and usually ended with them. Feeding them, burping them, changing them, and playing with them filled my entire days. At first I couldn't tell them apart, except for the tiny birthmark, but slowly I began to perceive slightly different personalities. Little Sharon was less demanding and slower to cry, while little Crystal was quicker to smile. I spent a lot of time sitting with the babies, so I used the time to study the new script. At this rate, I would know everyone's part, word for word, by the time that I went to the movie location. I also had a lot of time to write to my friends. Carol came up every weekend with Samantha and fawned over the babies for 2 days. On Saturday and Sunday I could relax and let them do much of the work. I got a break, they loved it, and the twins were well taken care of. When the Academy Award nominations came out in February, I learned that The Moons of Cappacia had been nominated for 5 awards in the categories of cinematography, music, original score, visual effects, directing, and Best Actress as Me. Open Spaces, Lost Loves had been nominated for 2 awards, directing, and Best Actor Alec Carsey. I guessed that I wouldn't be sitting with Jennifer Larita at the ceremony since neither of us had received a nomination for the movie. I immediately called Barbara to see if she could make me a gown, as I knew that I'd be invited to the awards ceremony. She wasn't home, but I was able to reach her at the theater. They had just finished up a 3-week production. She said that she'd start working on it right away. I would go there for a fitting and to pick the gown up just before the ceremony. Next I called Alec Carsey to congratulate him on his nomination. I was surprised to reach him directly. We talked for a little while and I eventually got around to asking him whom he was going to the awards ceremony with. He told me that he had a new girlfriend and that he would be going with her. We talked for about another 10 minutes and then wished each other luck before ringing off. My last call was to Oliver Adams. His love life seemed to parallel my own in that both of us always seemed to be free for dates. Oliver congratulated me on my nomination and I congratulated him on the success of his television show. They were in reruns now, but they had already been picked up for a second season. Oliver told me that he'd love to escort me to the Academy Awards. I had been so busy with the babies that the weeks had passed quickly. When Sharon returned after 6 weeks, I became depressed that they were leaving. At least I had my new movie to throw myself into. Once again we loaded up our cars with kitty gear while George loaded the big things into his truck, and we took everything down to Sharon's house. I said a sad goodbye to the babies after George had left, and drove back to the house. Mrs. McGuire and I left for Vancouver on March 16th. We found a crowd of press people waiting as I got off the plane. The movie company had given my arrival time as part of a press release announcing that we would be making the movie in Vancouver. The executive producer, Herb Dressen, was waiting, along with several staff members, to welcome me officially. After the greeting I was asked to speak with the press, so I fielded questions for about 10 minutes. Most of the questions were of the normal sort, asking about the movie and about my fellow actors. I answered honestly that I would know more once we had actually started filming, and that I hadn't yet met most of my fellow actors. Then one of the reporters asked when I was starting my next picture. I don't have any other new projects scheduled. But what about Robert Macmillan's announcement that you're going to star in his new movie based on the best-selling book, Weep for the Lonely Hearts? I'm sorry, but the only other picture that I've signed to do is the third part of Open Spaces, and that hasn't been scheduled yet. But Mr. Macmillan announced that they intend to start shooting in mid-July, and I believe that this picture is supposed to be completed in June. All I can do is repeat that I haven't been signed to do Mr. Macmillan's picture. Is it a dispute over money? There's no dispute over anything because there hasn't been any discussion that could lead to a dispute. Have you read the book? No, I haven't, although I've heard that it's quite good. But when do you expect to announce that you're doing the movie? I don't. If that's all, thank you for welcoming me to your city. Goodbye. I turned away from the reporters and started to walk away, unsure of where I was even going. I just knew that I wanted to get away from the jerk that wouldn't accept my answer that I wasn't going to be in a weep for the lonely hearts. I had never even met Robert Macmillan. This way, Miss Ramsay, someone at my side said. I saw that it was one of the men that had been with Mr. Dresson. He was indicating a corridor to the left. I'm sorry that you were subjected to that. That reporter is well known for being rude. He's one of those reporters who believe that they can get you to divulge confidential information if they keep pushing you enough. I'm Martin Sander, by the way. I'm the assistant producer for Princess to the Mob. How do you do, Mr. Sander? I don't know why that reporter wouldn't take my word that I haven't signed to do that movie. I guess because there was an article in the paper today that said you have. You know how it is. Reporters should be the last ones to believe everything that they read in the papers, but in fact, they're usually the first. There was an article that said I had signed to do a weep for the lonely hearts. Not exactly in those words. I believe that it said that you would star in the picture, not that you had signed to do it. I take it that you haven't even been contacted? That's correct. Then they might be using your name to raise funding for the picture. It's an old trick and still used quite often. Get the investors all excited by dropping a couple of really big names. They usually don't announce it to the press though. Maybe Macmillan was overheard and then couldn't deny it, or perhaps one of the investors leaked the news. Whatever. Where are we going? We have a limo waiting at the curbside. I'll have someone get your bags if you'll give me the claim checks. Mr. Sander escorted Mrs. McGuire and me to a stretch limo and then left with my claim checks. We sat inside the car waiting for perhaps 20 minutes before he returned. The driver popped open the trunk and the car shook slightly as the bags were loaded. Then Mr. Sander and Mr. Dresson got into the back. I'm sorry, Miss Ramsay, Mr. Dresson said. That fool is an obnoxious jerk. I should have handled that better and cut him off. It's okay, Mr. Dresson. Mr. Sander told me about the article. I hadn't heard about it until I arrived here. It's behind us now. We've found a nice house for you that's quite close to the studio. Don't you have a bodyguard? No, I don't. We'll get somebody for you right away. We don't want to risk anything happening to you while you're up here. Is Vancouver a dangerous place? No more so than any other large city. You're a big star, Miss Ramsay, with 2 Academy Award nominations. You have to be aware of the dangers from kidnappers or deranged fans. Or reporters. I smiled. I've begun to be aware of it. I intended to get someone by now, but I haven't. We'll get a temp for you until you can find a permanent person. I was under the impression that your mother was coming along. She'll join us in a week or 2. She had some things to take care of before she came. I see. Well, we start working tomorrow morning. A company driver will pick you up at 7:30. Is that okay? Fine, Mr. Dresson. You mentioned the Academy Award nominations. I'll need a day off to attend. They're held on Sunday, so I won't be here next Monday. I'll be on my way back. That's not a problem, Miss Ramsay. We're in your corner and hope that you win. Thank you, Mr. Dresson. We had arrived at a large 2-story frame house on a quiet street. The driver popped the trunk lid and carried the bags into the house while we talked on the sidewalk. When all of the bags were inside, Mr. Dressen and Mr. Sander told me that they'd see me in the morning and then left. Mrs. McGuire and I went inside to get ourselves settled in. The driver only had to wait a couple of minutes in the morning, while I finished my tea, put on my coat, and grabbed my purse. He had identified himself as Elwood. Apparently, his mother had been a big fan of the Blues Brothers movie, as he was named after the movie character played by Dan Aykroyd. Elwood drove the stretch limo directly to the studio lot. It took less than 10 minutes to get there and another few minutes to get to the studio building. Elwood showed me the way to my dressing room and I removed my coat and made myself at home. I knew that someone would come to let me know when I was needed. I already knew the script by heart, but I read through it again as I waited. About 15 minutes after I arrived, a production assistant came to get me for the cast meeting. The first half hour was spent in introductions and small talk, and then we got down to business, with Mr. Charles, the director, outlining the shooting schedule. After that we went through the script, and Mr. Charles gave us his interpretation of the story and the ideas that he wanted to convey. We spent the rest of the week rehearsing various scenes. On Friday, I hurried to the airport right after rehearsal and boarded a plane to begin my trip home to be fitted for the gown. It was almost midnight, local time, when I arrived at the old house. Everything was in good shape there. The company that had been hired to look after the house had been doing a good job of keeping the walks free of snow in the winter, and the grass mowed in the summer. Please subscribe for the next part and visit my Patreon page for early access. Link in the comment. Thanks.